Okay, so I have the machine going now. We'll call this recording a walk through the US Constitution and the four key principles of your Constitution. Remember, we are saying in this class, our motto for this class is that politics is about power. We're saying that politics is about power. In order for us to understand what power is, we need another definition. We have to say that power is the ability to influence choice. Once we're clear that power is the ability to influence choice, then we need to know specifically what choices we're talking about. So we're saying that the choices that matter are those that allocate scarce resources. So not only have we said that politics equals power, we've also said that there are some dimensions to power, those being choice, change, and space. Mhm. Once we roll these things together, then we come up with a set of definitions of something that we can do something with. What When we talk about scarcity, we're saying that politics equals power. Power is the ability to influence choice. The choices that matter are those that allocate scarce resources. Why is it important for us to talk about scarcity? We're saying that scarcity is the inability to achieve maximum satisfaction. It is, even in a economy that is as big as the United States, we earlier said that the US economy is something like $13 trillion gross domestic product. Even in an economy that large, the latest census numbers, I showed them to you, I don't know, a week or so ago. The latest census numbers say that there's like 11% of the American people are in poverty. Why is it possible? Why is it necessary for anybody to be in poverty with a economy this large? So scarcity involves the inability to achieve satisfaction. If no one can get everything that they want, then everyone is going to want more than what they received. So scarcity means that there will be conflict. All right. And the nature of the conflict is determined by the cultural makeup of the society, how economics, politics, and society, how they swirl together. But in the final analysis, the role of the government, the nature of the government is to create order and manage conflict. This is the way we come to the US Constitution. What does the Constitution do? That big C there stands for Constitution. What does the Constitution do? Well, the US Constitution is the basic document that divides power in the society. I'm going to use the word polity here. The Constitution divides power. A Constitution divides power. The US Constitution, as we'll see in a second, divides power by dividing the US government into three branches. It's going to give a separate power source for each of those branches. The US Constitution will further divide the legislative branch into two houses, and then those legislative branches will each be divided further into having separate committees, standing committees, and then various temporary or ad hoc committees. The US Constitution is going to give the presidency a particular power base of his own, and then it's going to divide the presidency into numerous. Well, the Constitution doesn't exactly do this, but the presidency is divided into numerous branches and agencies that make up the federal bureaucracy. The US Constitution in Article 3 is going to give the Supreme Court, you know, power and authority, right? Certain jurisdiction. And we know that the Supreme Court is divided into 9 separate jurists or Supreme Court justices that each have their governing or their judicial philosophies. Furthermore, the US Constitution in 3 places, as we'll see in a second, divides power into the states, says that the states have some powers, talks about the relationships between the states. And then further, and thankfully, the US Constitution gives rights to the American people. So when we say that the Constitution divides power in the polity or in the society, we're saying 3 branches of government, power for the states, rights for the American people. All right. So back up, I want to back up to an earlier discussion. We were looking at Max Weber, and Max Weber told us that politics equals power. And then based on that postulation, we had a conversation with Max Weber, and we asked Weber, what is the state? And Weber told us that the state is a specific type of political organization where the official institutions and the society interact through the use of power. Backing up, the state is a specific type of political organization. If we're saying that politics is power and a state is a political organization, then we're saying that states organize power. How does a state organize power? It organizes power specifically through the Constitution. Let's get to know the US Constitution. You see that your Constitution begins with a preamble. For your notes, let's call this section here, I'm giving you the organizational structure or the structural composition of the US Constitution, the structural composition of the Constitution. There is one preamble. We'll talk about it. Then you see that there are 7 articles. Let's watch me flip through Article 1 of the Constitution. Cast your eyes on the document. Look at how long and detailed. Look at how many words and how many enumerated powers talking about the rights of the criminally accused. Article 1 has some length to it. Look at Article 2. Article 2 of the Constitution speaks about the power of the president, talks about powers, talks about how you can limit the power of the president, talking about articles of impeachment. And then we go to Article 3. Notice that Article 1 is longer than Article 2 by far. Look at Article 3, looking at the judicial power housed in one Supreme Court and some of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Article 3 then is shorter than Article 2, which is shorter than Article 1. Why is Article 1 the longest article of the Constitution? What does it say in there that makes it necessary for it to be so long? How do we understand American Republican style democracy where the people's branch of government is listed with more detail in the Constitution than the other branches? You see Article 4 here. This is about the power of the states, rather the relationship between the states. Article 5 is the amendment process. Article 6 includes the supremacy clause. And then Article 7 says you need 9 out of the 13 states to ratify it. So back to the structural composition of the Constitution, we're saying that there's one preamble and then there's 7 articles. Let's keep it moving. After the articles of the Constitution, we just saw Article 5 of the Constitution says that it is possible, it is hard, but it is possible to amend or change the Constitution. And so you see here that over the course of American history, 233 years of constitutional history have produced only 27 amendments to the Constitution. So your structural composition of your Constitution is to say that there is one preamble, 7 articles, 27 amendments. Next part, let's talk about the 4 key ideas of the preamble. Let me see, can I make this bigger? 4 key ideas of the preamble to the Constitution. Here we go. All right, let's go here. Four key ideas of the preamble of the Constitution. Recall that your Constitution starts off with the phrase, "We the people." This is of fundamental importance to the American psyche. This phrase here, "we the people," is Governor Morris, one of the founding fathers. Governor Morris gets credit for penning this phrase. For your notes, the first key idea of the preamble is where it says "we the people." It speaks to a singular and unified American citizenry. A singular, meaning one, and unified, folks are together, American citizenry. That phrase, "we the people," means that you're an American first. You're not a New Yorker first or a Texan first. Well, not Texan at this time, but you're not a New Yorker first or a person from Virginia or a person from Rhode Island. Your state residency is of less importance than your nationalism. That's what that phrase, "we the people of the United States." It's supposed to unify the former 13 colonies under the singular banner of Americanness. The Constitution here has a second key idea. The second key idea here is to say, in order to form a more perfect union. Remember that so it says, in order to form a more perfect union. More perfect than what? If you need something to be more perfect, then that means this is the second at least time you're doing it, and the first thing you did wasn't perfect enough. So in order to form a more perfect union, then write this for your notes, acknowledges the failure of the Articles of Confederation. It acknowledges the failure of the Articles of Confederation. Mhm. All right. Now, let's go to the next key idea of your Constitution, your preamble, the third key idea. You see here, your preamble makes with the poetry. It talks about establishing justice. We're going to call that a form of order. Your preamble says ensuring domestic tranquility. We're going to call that a form of order. Your preamble says providing for the common defense. We're going to call that a form of order. So your preamble sets out order as one of the key values of American government. Your preamble says it's going to be about the business of promoting the general welfare. Well, this means that it's concerned with equality, the general welfare, concerned with equality. And then your preamble says that it's going to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Liberty is another synonym for freedom. So the third key idea of the preamble of the Constitution is it says freedom, order, and equality are the key values of government. Freedom, order, and equality are the key ideas of government. And then your preamble says, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. We just said that a Constitution divides power. We earlier read Weber, where Weber told us what is a state. And then Weber told us, okay, so Weber said a state is a specific type of political organization where the official institutions and the society interact through the use of power, political organization. Then we asked Weber, well, who is the state? This is something we did in the earlier lecture. Weber told us that the state is at least the government, the citizenry, and the public. And then we asked Weber, well, what is the government? And we said that Weber told us that the government is the group of people empowered with the authority to act on behalf of the state. So we roll those things into one understanding, and we're able to say here that the preamble of the Constitution establishes the federal government. All right. It establishes the federal government. And in so doing, this is the fourth key idea of the preamble of the Constitution. It establishes a federal government. Let us move on. You folks, y'all doing all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Doing okay? All right. Cool. Now thank you. Now let's check out the next thing we want to do here is we want to find, and this is for your notes, 4 key principles of the Constitution. 4 key principles. What does it mean to have a key principle, right? Your key principles are your governing principles. It's the stuff that you live by. These are the things that you're going to do when you don't know what else to do. Some of you might have some type of religious background, depending on your parents and whether or not they made you go to Sunday school or something like that, right? What is one of the governing principles of Christianity? It's the good news that Jesus sacrificed himself for your sins. What's some of the governing principles of Christianity? The golden rule, where you should treat others as you would have them treat you, right? So your governing principles are things that you live by, stuff that is supposed to mean something, what you're trying to achieve. There's some governing principles, or I'm going to use the phrase 4 key principles of the Constitution. Let's find them by getting to know the articles of the document. So the first thing we go here is first we need to know how to read the Constitution. So first thing you'll see is that the Constitution is divided into articles. We just said that there are 7 articles of the Constitution. Then you'll see that each article is divided into sections, okay? And then each section is divided into clauses. That's a C and a L. So when thinking about the Constitution, you use the phrase Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1. You use the phrase Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1, or Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, things like that, right? So when we're looking at the way that the Constitution is written, you want to make sure we can use the same language. All right, so let's look at Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution. It says all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. And it says that Congress shall consist of a Senate and the House of Representatives. So Article 1 here gives you the legislative branch. Article 1 gives you the legislative branch. Now, let's say something right up front. We earlier, in the earlier recording, you're going to see that we're talking about the New Jersey versus the Virginia plan as being the central debate during the Constitutional Convention. They worked this debate out by dividing Congress into 2 houses. Remember, the New Jersey plan wanted equal representation in the states. They did not want representation in the legislature based on population. They wanted every state to have equal representation in the legislature. And so the great compromise is to say you can have that, and we'll call this thing with equal representation, we'll call that the Senate. Mhm. The Virginia plan wanted proportional representation. The Virginia plan wanted representation in Congress based on population of the state. The more population, the more representatives in Congress. The great compromise then was to say, well, you can have that too, and we'll call this entity, this house that has proportional representation, we'll call it the House of Representatives. So sitting right here in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution, you find the great compromise. And in one word, what's the first part? This is the second part. What's the first part of the great compromise? It's called bicameralism, where bicameralism means you're dividing your Congress into 2 houses. bicameralism, where bi equals two, and this phrase camer stands for house. Bicameralism. All right, let's move on. Let's look at what's in Article, boom. Let's look at what's in Article 2 of the Constitution. Scrolling. Article 1 has a bit of length to it. We go to Article 2 of the Constitution. Article 2 says, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 says executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States, right? You see how it says vested. To vest means to put something in or to house something. So Article 2 says, it lays out the executive branch, and it says you're going to have a president. And then let's scroll to Article 3. Article 3 of the Constitution here says judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court. Vested, just as assuredly as your heart is vested down inside your chest cavity. Article 3 says judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court. It establishes the Supreme Court. Let's go to the first principle of the Constitution then. The first principle of the Constitution is to acknowledge what's going on in Articles 1, 2, and 3. Article 1 establishes the legislative branch. Article 2 establishes the executive branch. Article 3 establishes the judicial branch. The first key principle of the Constitution then is separation of powers. Separation of powers is defined as dividing the federal government into three branches. We'll look at the second principle of the Constitution right now. The second principle of the Constitution. Let's acknowledge a few things about your document. Your US Constitution here, let's stick with blue, right? Blue. The US Constitution says that one branch can do things, but if the thing that it's doing is big and significant enough, it needs another branch to allow it to happen. Okay, so for example, you see here that Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution says before a bill becomes a law, it has to be presented to the President of the United States. If the President approves, he signs it. But if he does not, he shall return it with his objections to the House in which it originated. Okay, so this is called the presidential veto. Recall, please, that the word veto does not appear in the Constitution, but this is the presidential veto. So if you need the president to sign a bill before it becomes law, then that's the president checking the power of the Congress. Now, you see here that if the Congress does not agree with the presidential veto, then you see that Congress has the ability to overturn that presidential veto by a 2/3 vote in both houses. Okay, 2/3 vote in both houses. So the president checks the power of Congress by issuing a veto, but then the Congress can balance the power of the president by having the opportunity to override that presidential veto. Let's do another one. Erase. All right, let's do another one. Let's go to Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. Of your document. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution here says, all right, it says here that the president, he shall have the power. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, that the president shall have the power, but then it says, by and with advice and consent of the Senate. So before it tells you what the president has the power to do, it injects the Senate in the middle of that sentence, right? And so the president can make treaties as long as the Senate agrees, provided 2/3 of the senators present occur. So this then is an example of the Senate being a check and a balance against the power of the president to make treaties with other countries. This Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution says he, meaning the president, shall be able to nominate, but it also says by and with advice and consent of the Senate, ambassadors, public ministers, counsels, judges of the Supreme Court, and other officers. So it says that the president can nominate people to either the bench or to other offices, but the senators have advice and consent, or the senators have the ability to confirm those presidential appointments. So these are two examples. There are many more in the Constitution, but these are two examples of the second key principle of your Constitution, which we're going to call checks and balances. Checks and balances means that one branch has the power to limit the powers of the other branches. Checks and balances. Let's keep it moving. Yeah, let's keep it moving. Let's look for a third principle of the Constitution. A third principle of the Constitution, let's go to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1 here says, the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states. Chosen by the people. What activity are the people engaged in when they are choosing members of the House of Representatives? They are participating in elections. Really? What do you call it when, what do you call it when the people are electing representatives to do the work of government on their behalf? Well, that's called republicanism. So let's make republicanism the third key idea of the Constitution, the third principle of the Constitution, republicanism, where republicanism means that the people have the power to elect their representatives. When we move past, okay, so remember that when the Constitution was written, only wealthy white males, landowning white males, had the ability to vote. But as the country matures and as the cause of civil rights gets extended throughout the country at the virtue of, the Civil War and such, changes in the economic nature of the country, right? Relaxations in the property requirement and the like, diminutions in the structural composition of racism and the like, you'll find that there's other amendments throughout American history that allow the people the right to vote. So you see here, the 15th Amendment says that citizens have the right to vote. And in particular, at the writing of the 15th Amendment, that meant African-American males. We'll talk about that later. You'll see here that the 17th Amendment says that the people have the right to elect their senators. You'll find that the 19th Amendment says that women have the right to vote. The 24th Amendment says that the poll tax is unconstitutional, so you don't have to pay money to register to vote. And then the 26th Amendment says that 18-year-olds have the right to vote. So we'll find that republicanism is such a key idea of the Constitution, is that it is embedded in the document multiple places. Let's turn our attention to the fourth key idea of the Constitution. In order to do that, let's read through Article 4 of your document. Article 4 of the Constitution here. Wait a minute, let me go to the right article. Article 4 of the Constitution says, full faith and credit shall be given, trying to let you see it's Article 4, full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and proceedings of every other state. We're going to call this Article 4 has within it the full faith and credit clause. Definition. The full faith and credit clause means, it means that states have to respect laws that are passed by other states. The full faith and credit clause. States have to respect laws that are passed by other states. Or another way to say this is that the full faith and credit clause, or Article 4, talks about, details the relationships that, or the relationship that should happen between the states, right? You'll see here later, I didn't put this part on the test, but at least this next test, but Article 4 here says that states can't discriminate against citizens of other states, right? All right, so Article 4 talks about the relationship between the states. Let's go to Article 6. We're still building up to the fourth key principle of the Constitution. Article 4, Clause 2. Article 4, Clause 2 of the Constitution says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States. Article 6 says, this Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. Article 6 of the Constitution then is the Supremacy Clause. This is the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause means that the federal government has the ability to make laws that the states have to follow. The Supremacy Clause says that if a state law conflicts with the federal law, then the federal law takes supremacy or precedent. Article 6 is the Supremacy Clause. For the fourth principle of the Constitution, we need to dip down into the 10th Amendment. And when we find our way to the 10th Amendment, we see the language here says that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So we'll find the 10th Amendment is called the Reserved Powers Clause. Reserved powers of the states, rather. The reserved powers of the states. So what we've just said is that Article 4 talks about the relationship between the states. Article 6 talks about the Supremacy Clause, looks at the relationship between the federal government and the states. And then the 10th Amendment is the reserved powers of the states, all right? So the fourth key principle of your Constitution is called federalism. Federalism means that there's a division of power between the federal government and the states. There's a division of power between the federal government and the states. Federalism. On this note about federalism, let me show you something about why it is such a key idea of the Constitution. We earlier just said that one of the key ideas of the Constitution is called separation of powers. Look at the chapters. If I can get my computer to work, look at the chapters that we're doing over the semester. Is there a chapter here called separation of powers? No, there's not. A second key idea of the principle of the Constitution is called checks and balances. Is there a checks and balances chapter? There is not. The third principle of the Constitution is called republicanism. Is there a republicanism chapter? Well, maybe, because when we go here, we're going to talk about interest groups, political parties, and elections, and those are all dealing with how people can affect the government. But in name, there is no republicanism chapter. But we're saying that the fourth key idea of the Constitution is called federalism. Is there a chapter called federalism? Absolutely, there is. There is always a chapter called federalism in every textbook on American government. So federalism has a certain amount of vital importance. I'm going to end this recording. So that was the four key principles of the U.S. Constitution.